I know we already prayed, but I'm going to pray again because we need it today.
No.
I need it today. So, dear Lord, thank you again for today. Thank you for everything that you've given us. Thank you that you are in control of the weather. That even the wind and the waves and the freezing rain obey you. Thank you for bringing us here. I just pray that we would focus and that we would be able to discuss your word and be able to focus on you and not worry about anything else right now. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so we finished Leviticus, and it was all about what? What was the one word that you can summarize all of Leviticus?
Laws. Sacrifice.
You guys.
Laws. Word sacrifice. Laws.
Starts with an H.
Oh, there.
Ends with an holiness.
Holiness.
Holiness, yeah. The whole point of Leviticus is the Lord is holy and he wants his people also to be holy.
The main verse for the whole book that you had us memorize.
Yeah.
It's been so much easier if I just remembered that.
Right? It's almost like there's a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Leviticus was all about holiness, and then Numbers is honestly kind of the opposite of that. It's about how the people messed up, and God kind of finally is like, okay, I'm kind of done with this wicked generation. There's no more Mr. Nice Guy. It's now business. Yeah, it's the consequences of their actions. Okay? And then in a couple weeks, we're going to get to Deuteronomy, which is going to kind of be a summary of what has happened so far for the next generation. All right, so we are in Numbers 1 through 19, the first half of Numbers today. And how did the reading go for everybody?
I only made it to chapter 10.
Okay,
I
that's
did
not bad.
most of it last night.
Most of it last night?
I did most of it yesterday
too.
I did a little bit.
I got to chapter 4.
All right, that's right. You can still follow along and participate in the conversation. So, let's look at the first half of today's reading, Numbers 1 through 10. Chapters 1 through 10. All right, so open up Bibles and notebooks, and let's get some summary going. Would anybody like to give us a summary of the first few chapters? Go ahead, Lucy.
I can do 1 and 2.
Go for it.
So in these chapters, they're counted. How many warriors and stuff. For the record, I added them all up to get 600 and whatever thousand. Before I saw at the end, before I saw that it was just said it.
Nice.
I don't think I'll do that one.
And so they added up to 550 soldiers. And all those soldiers, they're stationed around the tabernacle so that they can be like ready to protect it and move it.
So yeah, there's a census of Israel. All of the men, 20 years and older,
that are able to
fight is 603,550.
Besides the Levites.
Not including the Levites.
Which is 373 last.
Okay. All right. So that's the first couple of chapters. It talks about how the camp is set up and which tribe is to the north, south, east, and west, and all that. Okay. Someone pick up at chapter 3.
Chapter 3 is pretty much the roles and responsibilities with the different clans.
Rules and responsibilities of the Levites. Yeah. Kind of a repeat from things that we learned in Leviticus. Right? Before we go much further, I will tell you this. If you look back at chapter 1, verse 1, it says, the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting on the first day of the second month in the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt. If you look at Exodus chapter 40, verse 2, on the first day of the first month, you shall erect the tabernacle in the tent of meeting. Okay, so the first day of the first month, exactly a year after they left Egypt, they set up the tabernacle. And then Leviticus kind of takes place in that same exact time frame, plus or minus a month or so. And then Numbers starts in the second month. So a month after the tabernacle went up. Okay, just so we know where we're at in the timeline. Starts right there when the tabernacle went up. Okay? That's why it kind of repeats some of what we heard in Leviticus. It might be telling the same story in a different perspective, or giving the same laws summarized into this much instead of like 3 chapters of what the Levites do. Okay? Alright, picking up in chapter 4, it's kind of the same thing, the duties of the Levites, but it's a little bit more divided because the tribe of Levi is a group, this big, and it's made out of, is it 3 or 4 smaller groups? Right? You have the Kohathites, the Gershonites, and the Merarites, and then Aaron and his sons that are the priests. Yeah. So you have like 4 different groups inside the Levites, and it talks about what they do. This group is in charge of carrying this part of the tabernacle when we move. This group is in charge of doing this. This group is in charge of doing that. Okay?
Which group was in charge of carrying the ark?
Read it. It's in chapter 4. It's the Kohathites. Alright, chapter 5. What's it talk about?
Talks about community purity.
Unclean people.
And it also talks about more stuff about wrongdoings and adultery.
Yeah, it's some more laws, right? About basically quarantining if you're sick, about restitution, which is basically if you did something wrong, how you make up for it, not just between you and God, but between you and other people. And then there's a procedure laid out for unfaithfulness in marriage. Okay? Chapter 6.
Talks about how
Someone other than Hannah.
The Nazarite vow.
Okay, what's the Nazarite?
It's like you separate yourself from others to be with God.
Yeah. It's a special vow between you and God. There's holiness, and then there's like another level of holiness. Holiness being separation. So everybody is supposed to be different from the rest of the world, and then this Nazarite vow is like you take it a step further. Like, you also don't do this, and this that the rest of the Israelites can do. Yeah, another way of holiness. Usually with a purpose. Usually. Okay? Chapter 7 talks about what?
The offerings that each of the tribes give to the tabernacle.
Yep. So chapter 7 is on the day when Moses had finished setting up the tabernacle. So it kind of bounces back and forth. Beginning of Numbers was a month after the tabernacle was set up. Chapter 7 is on the day that it was set up. So we're now a month earlier than the beginning. It bounces around. It's not straight chronological. Okay? Like Genesis, pretty much straight chronological. Exodus, for the most part, is straight chronological. These other books kind of bounce back and forth. And you can think of that because most likely Moses was writing all of this at the end of his life. And if you at about 120 years old, decided to start keeping a journal of your entire life, it would probably be a little out of order, right? Especially if you couldn't like insert something into it, or just go, I'm just gonna add a paragraph here and start typing, right? If you were writing it in paper or on stone, I don't know how Moses would have written, probably papyrus. And you're just writing it all down, beginning to end. You're like, oh wait, I forgot to add, on the first month, a month earlier than where we were just talking about, this happened, right? You can think of it like that. It's an old man keeping a journal of his whole life, but he wasn't necessarily writing it down as he was going, okay? That's why the timeline is a little bit wonky sometimes, okay? So yeah, it talks about all of the offerings that each tribe brings as the tabernacle is set up for the first time. Okay, chapter 8 is more things about the Levites. Right? It's how they can be clean and what they do when they get too old to serve in the tabernacle. Okay?
Wait, it's
the age
about the
that
seven
you-
lamps. Well, if you read it, then you know.
And it also very briefly talks about the lampstand, the 7 different lamps that are in the tabernacle. Okay? Chapter 9. Anybody? Okay. Leave it, go ahead.
They're celebrating the Passover.
Yeah. This is the first time that the Passover was celebrated. Right? The first time they did it wasn't the celebration, it was the actual act of the Passover. And now this is a year later when they are remembering what happened last year. All of this is only a year later. This is the first time that they are actually celebrating the Passover.
They didn't like have a few years and then
All of this that happened,
that was a year?
everything that happened from the time that they left Egypt up till now has only been about a year.
1 down, 39 to go.
Woo. I will also tell you this, there is a big time jump between this week's reading and next week's reading, like the reading you're about to start. Specifically, it's about 38 years of a time jump. And you figure that out when you read through chapter 33. I don't think it's on the highlights, but I would encourage you to read chapter 33 and put some pieces together, because you'll see, yeah, the first half of Numbers is the first about year and a half or so that they are out of Egypt. And then the second half of Numbers is the last year and a half before they actually get to the promised land. It just kind of skips, 37-ish years in the middle
Walking around.
of like living in the wilderness. They didn't really do anything important for all that time. People died, and that's all. Pretty depressing.
Some were born.
Yes, Hannah.
It also talks about how God came into the tabernacle, like he showed us cloud by day and then fire by night.
Which we saw at the end of Exodus, and again, it's just retelling that here. That the presence of the Lord was on the tabernacle as a pillar of cloud or smoke in the day and fire at night. So they knew this is where the presence of the Lord is. And when that visible presence left, it was time to pack up camp and leave and go follow the presence of the Lord. Right? All right, and then chapter 10 starts by God saying, make trumpets, and these couple of silver trumpets are going to be used in worship. They're going to be used when it's time to break camp. They're going to be used in war. They're going to be used in all of these different ways to benefit the camp, to benefit the nation of Israel. Okay? And then the second half of chapter 10, in the second year, in the second month, on the 20th day of the month. So we're back to the second month, about 20 days after the first chapter of Numbers. The presence of the Lord leaves, and that means it's time to follow. And so they're finally, after about a year and some change, they're finally leaving Mount Sinai, where they got the 10 Commandments. So they went pretty much straight from Egypt, crossed the Red Sea, did a little bit of wandering for just a little while, and then landed at the mountain of God. Got the 10 Commandments, lived there for about a year, and then now God is saying, okay, time to move on. We're going to the promised land now. Yeah, it'll be so grand. All right, that is our summary of chapter 1 through 10. Someone give me a couple of main verses. Maybe not for every chapter. But did everybody get a handout?
Wait, there's a handout?
Guys.
You got it? Shannon did all that work of copying them.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. If you read one off the handout, I'm going to ask you why you think it's important.
Because you think it's important.
I have
Why not?
something to point out though.
Okay.
With chapter 6, how it says Aaron's blessing, it reminds me of a song that's it's similar words like the Lord bless you and keep you, the Lord makes his face shine upon you and be gracious to you.
Yeah. Yep, that's been turned into a few different songs.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
There's a lot of
yeah,
verses in the Bible that are just straight up lyrics of songs. There are a lot of lyrics of songs that are straight up verses from the Bible. There we go. That's how it is. To be fair, anytime that you see, like, she's talking about chapter 6, verses 24, 25, and 26, and you see it's in, like, weird paragraph form, it's a poem. Anytime that there's a poem, it's written in that weird paragraph form, like that. And so you could probably say, oh, I bet you someone sang that at some point. Because poems are just naturally meant to be sung and turned into songs. Okay? Alright, any other main verses before we move on? That's it. Okay. So let's talk about the difference between priests and Levites. Okay? The difference between priests and Levites. Would somebody like to explain that to me, DJ?
So the Levites is like a tribe of people, and their main job is to be the priests and the holy ones who do the holy work, stuff like that. But they're not really all specifically priests. The priests.
Yeah. You're pretty much saying it. Okay. What is this?
Square.
Box.
There's a
It's
big.
not a square.
Kind of
It's
a
a
trapezoid.
big
It's a
rectangle.
rectangle.
Right. What is this?
A door.
A square.
Pretend that I'm good at drawing
House of
squares.
meat.
There's a square. Okay. Is a square a rectangle?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, Titus.
Yes, it is.
Titus, what is my
Try not
your
to die
bacteria.
while I'm teaching.
A square is not a rectangle, but a rectangle's a square.
What?
That is true.
I
That is
think
not
so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
What makes a rectangle a rectangle?
That has four sides,
It
and,
has four
and
sides.
at least two of them are equal.
4 right angles.
And at least two of them are equal.
Yeah, at least, and the opposite sides are equal to each other.
Yeah.
So this side and this
Parallel.
side are the same as, and this side and this side are the same. Right?
Okay.
Rectangles, they're not necessarily all 4 sides are equal, but just opposite sides are equal.
Yeah.
Uh,
Therefore,
Okay.
they're squares.
Now,
A square.
what makes a
is
square a
rectangle.
square? Okay, so let's see. There's 4 sides, like a rectangle. There's 4 right angles, like a rectangle.
And all the sides.
And the opposite sides are the same length, like a rectangle.
A square is a rectangle.
A square is a rectangle.
It's like a type of rectangle.
I'm gonna.
Exactly. So a priest
This is
is like a type.
Based on the definition of rectangle, a square is a rectangle.
Exactly. You're
Yes, I was right.
But,
A priest is.
I think I know the
but
difference.
what's unique about a square?
It's a priest.
All 4 sides are the same length of a square, right? Can that be said about a rectangle? No.
Well,
doing geometry.
technically a square is a rectangle.
So a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square. right, Lucy?
Not all rectangles are squares. Because
Are you calling me a square?
So, the Levites are rectangles. Okay?
That's not even a rectangle, it's a square.
This is,
It's not long enough. I kind of look
Yeah.
like a trapezoid.
it's a rectangle.
The two sides are supposed to be longer. Let's move on.
Use your imagination and pretend like I'm good at drawing, okay?
It is a square now.
So, the Levites are not all priests, but all priests are Levites.
That's what
Okay?
I'm
Priests are
saying.
squares. Levites are rectangles.
Okay.
Okay? All priests are within the tribe of Levi, but not all Levites, not all people in the tribe of Levi are priests.
So she's not a
Okay?
priest.
Because some of them are part of the sub-tribe of Kohath.
What kind of keep is that?
it's another rectangle because they're not priests.
It's a rectangle.
It's a rectangle. They're
Some
not
of them,
priests.
some of them are from the tribe of Gershom, and Lucy, what's the last one? It's the Merari.
Triangle.
Yeah.
And some of them are from the sub-tribe of
Class,
Merari,
guys.
I think, or whatever the name is. Okay? So these people are Levites, but they are not priests. The priests are Aaron and his descendants.
His little
His-
ones.
What? Oh, the Cox family?
Yeah.
Quite possible.
Our blood goes up.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a-
You have the genetic marker. Yeah. Yes.
So the priests are priestly things, even though they're Levites, but the Levites that weren't priests, they like cared for the tabernacle and its
Yeah.
furnishings.
So the priests who are Levites, the priests were the ones who interacted with God. Right, Shannon?
Yes.
The priests are the ones who dealt directly with the sacrifices. If you bring a sacrifice, you bring it to the priests. Right? They offer it to God. Okay? The Levites do everything else in the tabernacle. Right? Someone's got to clean the blood. Someone's got to like sweep the floors.
The janitor.
Okay, the janitors. They did all the other duties, and especially when it was time to move camp, they're the ones who broke down the tabernacle and carried the parts. Somebody has to carry that bronze altar that weighs a zillion tons or however much it is. Somebody has to carry that. Okay? Yeah, you can't load it on a semi. I think even those ones, they didn't even load them on carts for oxes to pull. They had to, like, there were poles, and you get several guys on each side and lift it and put it on their shoulders and carry it. Right, Shannon?
Yes.
Are
you sure?
Yeah. All right. So the priests are the ones who interact directly with the sacrifices and deal with the spiritual aspect of everything. The Levites are the workers. They're the servants, the deacons, you could say, in the tabernacle. What? They're the ones who do the other work. Okay. All right. That's the difference between priests and Levites. So all priests are Levites, not all Levites are priests. Okay? And let's briefly talk about the Nazirite vow in chapter 6. Mainly what I want to say about the Nazirite vow is that there are 3 people that we know for sure of in the Bible who took the Nazirite vow. Or in all 3 cases, the Nazirite vow was taken for them
Wasn't it Samson?
before they were born. They were dedicated by their parents with the Nazirite vow. Who were those 3 people?
Samuel.
Samuel,
Samson?
Samson,
Jesus.
no, close.
Of course.
John the Baptist.
John the Baptist. Okay, so what? He was a Nazarene from Nazareth. which is different than the Nazarite vow. It sounds very similar.
Too many Nazar.
Too many Nazars. Yeah. So, Samson in the book of Judges, his mom took the Nazarite vow for him. I believe all three of these cases, it was a barren woman saying, Lord, if you bless me with a son, he will be yours and he will follow this Nazarite vow. He will be extra set apart. And so Samson was the first, and then Samuel in the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel, and then John the Baptist in the Gospels. Okay? So that means when you read chapter 6, anything that it says a person who takes the Nazarite vow should do is something that those three people should do. Do they do it?
Not always.
Not necessarily, as we'll, when we get to Samson in the book of Judges in a couple of months, we will come back to Numbers chapter 6, and we will see all the times that he broke the Nazarite vow. And I'm fairly confident he broke every part of this Nazarite vow before he died. Don't quote me on that. We'll discover it for ourselves when we get there.
About it.
Go ahead.
So during the vow, they cut their hair, right? During the vow, they cut their hair.
During the vow, they are not supposed to cut their hair.
During the vow.
During the vow.
Okay.
Right? And usually, the vow is not meant to be lifelong.
No,
Not every time.
it's like 25 to 50.
It's, here's a certain amount of time, and for this next 2 years, I'm going to be set apart even from the holy nation of Israel. I'm going to be set apart even further and take this Nazarite vow for the next 2 years. And for those 2 years, I wouldn't cut my hair, I wouldn't eat grapes, I wouldn't drink wine, I wouldn't touch dead bodies, I wouldn't whatever the rest of chapter 6 says. All of those things.
It specifies.
I wouldn't do that from now until 2 years from now on a certain day that's been predetermined, and that's how long my vow lasts, is exactly 2 years, or however long I decided. If during that time I break any one of these parts of the Nazarite vow, shave my head, go through the offerings, and restart. Okay? It's like when you play the quiet game and I say, no talking for the next 5 minutes. And then someone talks like a minute and a half into it. Okay, time restarts 5 minutes starting now. And we get 30 seconds into it and someone talks, okay, 5 minutes restarts now. And you like basically never make it to 5 minutes. That's how this works. I'm gonna follow the Nazarite vow for a certain amount of time, and if I break it halfway through, I have to reset and go all the way through again. Okay? So Samson should have been offering a ton to fix what he was doing wrong. And we'll talk about that in a couple months when we get to that. Okay? Are there any questions about the Nazarite vow or comments?
So they don't cut their hair during the vow, but at the end they give a sacrifice and cut their hair.
At the end, or if they break the vow part of the way through and have to restart, then they shave their head, do the offerings, and restart.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay? Anything else there? Any other questions for chapters 1 through 10? Adults, any other comments?
Not for 1 through 10.
Not for 1 through 10? Okay. Let's look at 11 through 19. Alright, 11 through 19. I bet you someone could summarize the whole section in 1 to 2 sentences.
The people complain.
What?
The people complain.
Yeah, what's the second half? The people
Spies.
complain and what happens?
Spies.
And there's judgment.
Judgment from them.
The people complain and God judges them for it.
God judges them.
I feel like
God,
that made
Moses
this too
cries.
light of a word for what they got.
Wrath.
Punishes? The people complain a lot and God punishes a lot. What are some main verses for 11 through 19.
Wait, are we not doing? We're not summarizing.
We did. The people complain and God punishes them.
Oh. Oh. I think you're just
I mean, there's a
doing
little
11.
more specific of when they complain and how they complain. Miriam and Aaron complain against Moses. The people request meat and say, I wish I was back in Egypt where there was meat. And God says, you want meat? I'll give you meat, not just for a day or two, not even for a week or two, a whole month. You're going to be eating this meat until it comes out of your noses.
Wait,
Have you ever like eaten something and then you're like,
Yes.
especially like spaghetti or something?
Yes, that was.
Ew.
Like,
I
comes out
know.
with
I've never had spaghetti. I've never
Gross,
had
right?
have you?
Yeah.
I
all the
find
time.
I find it cool how in number 16,
Everybody listening?
number 16, like 250 leaders plus 3 other people go up to Moses,
Mhm.
Aaron, and complain about their leadership, and God was on Moses' side and sucks all of them in the ground.
As soon as you finish speaking over
Wait,
the words, the ground
okay,
under them
creepy.
split apart, and the earth split down and swallowed them up with
Yeah.
their households and all the people that belonged to Korah and all their goods.
Mhm. Yeah, and it was some of the Levites, right? Some of the Levites that came up and were basically saying, why does Moses think he's in charge? We should basically hold a coup or a mutiny or a rebellion. And they go up to Moses, and Moses says, you know what? If you guys are right and God is with you, you'll all just die of natural causes as everybody else does. But if these people die because God does something new and opens the ground and swallows them up, and they are sent to the grave alive, they are sent to Sheol, the underworld, Hades, alive, then we will know that God is not on their side. And immediately the ground opens up and those rebels fall into the ground, and then it goes, and they
Imagine being buried
are just
alive.
gone now.
Uh-huh.
And then a day later, like right after that happened, the rest of the people of Israel
Plague.
are like saying, Moses killed the people of God. And God got really upset. And what happened to those people?
He sent a plague that killed 14,700 different people.
Yeah. God said, Moses, Aaron, get yourselves away from these people because I'm going to consume them all at once, and I don't want you to get caught in the crossfire. And Moses said, Aaron, get to the tabernacle, offer, give sacrifices, make atonement for the people so that they don't all die. And Aaron does that, and he brings the offering back and separates the dead from the living and puts the offering between them, and only 14,700 people died that day because of it. Because Moses and Aaron interceded on behalf of the people of Israel. So only 14,700 died.
Okay.
Could have been worse.
It could have been worse.
It could have been a million and only half of them
It could have
survived.
been everybody. Right? Something super important happens in chapter 13 and 14. What happens there? It's a big turning point in the story of the Exodus and the journey to the Promised Land.
Spies.
Yeah. Yeah.
12 spies that went.
Do you want to summarize that, Shannon?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
God said, I think, told them to go send spies into Canaan. And I think they were there for like 40 days.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then they came back and reported, and the things were kind of good. Like they had like, I think it said like they were flowing with milk and honey or something
Yeah.
like that.
They reported it's a very prosperous land. They brought back
Yeah.
a single cluster of grapes that had to be carried by 2 people because it was such a big cluster of big grapes. And so then all the, what?
What was that again?
13 and
13 and 14? So they went off into the land for 40 days. They came back. They said the land is amazing. It's got awesome like grapes and stuff. We should go into the land right now, right? Is that what they said?
No.
What did they say?
They're scary people.
Yeah, they said the land is great. There's amazing like produce. It's very prosperous, but there's scary people. There's great strongholds, strong defenses, strong cities, strong armies. The people make us look like grasshoppers. We're so tiny. They're so big and amazing. They even claim that there's the Nephilim that we saw right before the flood. Whether or not there are, in fact, Nephilim, I don't know. They say that there are. There's these giant people in there. We're going to get squashed like bugs. Can't go.
Didn't 10 of them say that like it's too hard, but then like only 2 of them said that like okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
Joshua and Caleb.
Joshua and Caleb were 2 of the spies, and they said, the Lord is on our side.
And
We need to do what he says and take the land.
And didn't
But 10 said no. And the rest of the people then, the rest of the people of Israel sided with those 10 spies and said, we shouldn't go, it's scary, we don't want to die as soon as we get there. That would be pointless. And Moses and Aaron say, but God says we need to go. And the people were like, who cares? We're going to die. And they rebel. And God says, how about we just kill everybody? Just kill the whole nation of Israel. We'll start again with Moses and Aaron and their families. And how about we just do that?
God made a promise to Abraham.
Yeah, and
Isaac,
Moses says that exact thing. He says, do you really want to bring us out into the wilderness just to kill us? You promised these people that they would make it to this promised land. What will the Egyptians think if we die out here in the wilderness? If the Lord kills us in the wilderness? You made a promise. Keep it. The Lord is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquity and transgression. Right? That's where we get the verse for Numbers.
Didn't the descendants of the 2 spies that said like okay, let's do this, God is with us, the descendants of them were the only ones that actually went to the promised land?
Those 2 are the only ones of that generation that made it into the promised land. Because at the end of, or kind of in the middle of chapter 14, God says to this whole generation, none of you who saw the plagues and the miracles of Egypt and saw deliverance out of slavery into the wilderness toward the promised land, none of you are going to make it to the promised land. You are all going to die. The entire generation of you are going to die before Israel gets to go into the promised land. How many people over 20 are there in the nation of Israel at this time? 603,550 men able to go to war, plus the women, plus the old people that aren't able to go to war, plus the injured people that aren't able to go to war,
Plus the children.
plus the children.
They say 20 and under.
So even if we're just going with the 20 and older, because those are the people, the generation that's now cursed and is not going to make it. That's right there at least 1 million people, right? This whole time we've kind of been saying 1.5 million Israelites. That number, seeing the 603,550 fighting men, is probably closer to like 2.5 or 3 million people. Okay? Just based on that number. Yeah.
And Moses had to deal with all
And Moses had to deal with all of them. And God says that 603,550 fighting men, and then probably an equal number of women, and then the people who are older than that, none of you, 1 million people or so, are going to make it to the promised land. You are all going to die out here because of your rebellion. That's rough.
But we really sounded like, I didn't know about that.
Bummer, dude.
Well, and then he sent them out into the wilderness for 40 years because it took 40 days for the spies to
Yeah.
come back.
And he says, For each day that the spies were gone, you will be out here for a whole year. 40 days the spies in the promised land. For 40 years you will not be in the promised land. And all million of you are going to die by the time those 40 years are up. And then your children will be allowed to go into the promised land.
Do you think Moses might have been jealous by that?
Oh, probably. And we'll get to that at the end of Deuteronomy. After this next generation grows up and Moses gives them the law and recounts what's been happening this whole time, Moses is not allowed in the promised land because he, as the leader, makes some mistakes and God holds him accountable and says, you can climb this mountain, you can look off into the distance and see the promised land, but you don't get to go. Yikes. And then Joshua leads them into the promised land in the book of Joshua. Okay? So let's talk about in Numbers 14, 21 through 23. We're kind of talking about it right now. God says, but truly as I live, and as all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, none of the men who have seen my glory and my signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and yet have put me to the test these 10 times and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to their fathers. So he says, you have put me to the test these 10 times and have not obeyed me. And this is the final straw. And now you're done. You're not going to see the promised land. So let's look at those 10 complaints. It's kind of a review to be reminded what has led up to this point, to God finally saying, that's it. You're done. Your kids will get the blessing. You're not getting it. Okay? So, what? Yeah, say hi to the promised land for me.
Well, they then try to go in there and defeat.
Yeah.
But they weren't
Yeah,
able to.
right
God
after
wasn't on them.
Right after this rebellion, the people are like, oh no, we're not allowed into the promised land. Let's invade real quick, and that'll make up for it. We'll do what God wants us to do and go into the promised land and defeat the people. And it was
Obedience is disobedience.
delayed obedience. God wanted them to do that. They rebelled and said no. God said, okay, you're not going to make it. Then they said, wait, we'll do it anyway. We'll go ahead and do it now.
Time's up, Buster.
And they made it in a little ways. There was a battle. They were defeated and chased back out.
And probably like
Too little, too late. So let's look at the
Lost
10 times that Israel tested the Lord and didn't obey him. Didn't listen to him. Okay. How many people do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Not 9, not 10, 9, 10. Okay. Each of you gets to look up one reference. Okay. Ready? Exodus 14, 11, and 12. Exodus 15, 24. Exodus 16, 3. Exodus 16:20 for Leah. Shiloh 16:27 through 29. Exodus.
16:27.
Yep, 16:27 through 29. Titus. Exodus 17, 2 and 3. Rachel. Exodus 32. Lydia. Numbers 11, 1 through 2. Hannah, Numbers 11, 4. Numbers 14.
wait, chapter 32?
Chapter 32. Okay?
All of Numbers 14.
So, these are all things that you should have read already. So I just want you to look at it, familiarize yourself with it, and just be able to give us a one-sentence reminder of what happened there. Okay. What happened? What was the first thing that happened that they were testing God?
Oh, they were complaining about leaving Egypt, and they're like, oh, we're just converted to serve the Egyptians.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was right before what happened.
Oh, yeah, they would cross the Red Sea.
Yeah. It was right before they had to cross the Red Sea. They were trapped, and they said, why didn't we just stay slaves in Egypt? That would have been better than dying right here as soon as we get out. First, they immediately doubted that God was actually going to get them out of this situation. Then what happened?
They were grumbling and they were like, "What are we gonna drink? This water here is bad."
Mhm.
And Moses is like,
Yeah. So, 3 days out of Egypt, and they're thirsty, and there's bitter water, and they're complaining that they don't have anything to drink. They think that God brought them out into the desert to make them die of thirst. Then what happens?
And they complain about food.
Yeah.
Not just water.
Okay,
They're
he
like,
brought us out here, he gave us water, now we're gonna die of starvation.
"We had so much meat and bread back in Egypt.
Yeah.
Now we just got nothing."
Alright, and then God provides them something to eat, and what happens
And
in
then
16?
God tells Moses to tell them not to keep more than they could eat because it will become stale and it's gonna stink the next morning.
Yeah. And yet, did they keep extra manna?
No.
Some people did. They kept extra manna, and it had worms. They didn't listen to God. And then immediately after that, still with the manna, what happens?
like on the seventh day, the Lord told Moses like, "How long will you like refuse to like do what I tell you and like keep this?" And then the Lord the Lord is giving you a Sabbath. And he gives them bread for 2 days.
Yeah. He gives them extra bread and says, take a day off. And does everybody take a day off?
Nope.
No, some of them go out and try and gather more.
All of you in this place, don't
Yeah.
don't.
Then what happens in Exodus 17?
And they're like, "Oh, we're thirsty."
We're thirsty again. There's no water.
And Moses is like, "Why are you testing the Lord?"
Yeah.
And so, and they're like, "Why'd you bring us out of Egypt to kill us
Yeah.
and our children and our livestock?"
Yeah, we're thirsty again. You brought us out into the desert to die of thirst again. All right, and then a little bit later, what happens in Exodus 32?
They build a golden calf because Moses went up on the mountain and they're like, we don't have anyone to worship. We miss all the old gods at Egypt. So we're just gonna make a golden calf out of all the rings
Oh,
and
these
earrings
people.
and
Oh my
whatever.
gosh, they're making me mad.
These people are crazy. And then what happens in Numbers 11? This one,
Start complaining of like, oh, all this stuff has happened to us.
it's just general complaint. They're just sad. They're just upset. Nothing's going their way. It doesn't even say that they were complaining about being thirsty. They were complaining about all the things, about all of their misfortunes. They're like, woe is me, everything's bad. Yep. And then Numbers 11:4.
They were pretty much complaining about the food.
Yeah, they're hungry again.
No, they were complaining, I'm tired of manna, I want
Yeah.
meat, I want melons, I want grapes.
We're being fed, but we want better food. And that's when God says, you want meat? I'll give you meat out your noses. And then
Quail from
a lot of
sea.
people got a tummy ache and died.
But now we died. Now we're hungry. We don't want meat anymore.
And finally, what we had just talked about, Numbers 14. What was the straw that broke the camel's back?
And then all the congregation raised a loud cry and people wept that time.
Yeah. It was when
And-
the spies got home and gave a bad report and the people rebelled. Right?
And they said, "Let's get a leader and go back to
Yeah.
Egypt."
And finally
And God's
God
like,
says,
"No."
you're
And then
done.
Moses is just like,
You're done.
"Yeah, but then the Egyptians will
Feed us.
They'll
slave us and feed
like pick you up real and stuff
Yeah.
because you promised it." And
Yeah.
God's like, "No."
Yep. And so God, rather than just wiping out the whole nation, says, okay, I'm only going to wipe out the adults. The ones who actively rebelled against me this last year and a half, I'll only kill them. The children, they're safe. They're going to make their own bad choices, but I will let them grow up and make their own bad choices. All the adults are going to die out. That's just how it is. And that's basically how the first half ends, is people are going to die. And spoiler alert, chapter 20, Miriam dies. Yep. And other people die.
Well, she got
And other
striped
bad
with
things.
leprosy because she
Jethro.
went against Moses.
All right. Are there any other
I'm
questions
guilty
about the
of
first
it.
half of Numbers?
No,
No? Okay.
I have
Yes.
a comment.
Okay.
The whole thing, like, they're like, oh, I'm hungry and thirsty. Like, yeah, they're so annoying, they're so stupid, but we do the same thing.
We do the same thing.
But just in different ways.
Just, yeah, different things that we complain about.
We also do it the same way as well.
We do. We do.
I'm
All right.
hungry. I'm
All
hungry.
right. Your homework is the second half of Numbers. Memorization verse is the same. Numbers 14, 18. We have youth band after service today for anybody who is able to stay. Business meeting has been moved to next week. So next week we have youth band after the business meeting. Today youth band is right after service. Let me pray and then we'll be dismissed. Dear Lord, thank you for showing mercy on us. Thank you that you are abounding in steadfast love. You're slow to anger, that you forgive our iniquities and transgressions. But thank you that you also punish us when we deserve it. You lead us into the right way of acting, the right way of thinking, and you were patient with us because we were stubborn, just like the people of Israel that kept doing the same thing over and over and over again. But you didn't wipe them out. You were merciful and gracious. You still gave them the punishment, but you were merciful in that. Thank you that you are even more merciful with us, that we have salvation from every complaint that we bring to you, and from all the wrongdoings that we do constantly. But we have perfect ultimate salvation in your Son. And it is in his name that I pray. Amen.